This is a follow-up to the first intervals video because we covered a lot of information, and some people had questions about the second part of the video. If you want to rewatch the first video, I'll link it here and also in the description below. So the second part of the intervals video talks about the character or the type of interval. This is the first part of the interval's name, the second part being the distance, and we use words like major, minor, augmented, or diminished to describe this part of the interval. So, how do we know what word to use when describing an interval? For me, it's easiest to think about a major scale in order to find the interval name. And the best part about this is that you only need to know one scale. Yes, there are other kinds of scales, but today, all we need is the major scale. So let's take the C major scale for example. The key signature has no sharps or flats, so we don't have to worry about that, and we have the notes C to C in the scale. But an interval is the relationship between two notes. So far, we only have one note at a time going up and down the scale. We need to have another note as some sort of reference point in order to make the intervals. What do we use? We use the tonic, or the first note of the scale, and add it to each of the steps in the scale, so now we have something that looks like this. And here's where you have to do some memorizing, but once you memorize this part, it's the same for any major scale. So the unison, fourth, fifth, and octave are all perfect intervals, and the rest are major intervals. That's it. That's the whole thing. You now know all the intervals in any major scale. E flat major, same intervals. F sharp major, same intervals. The next thing you're probably going to ask yourself is, why do we have to memorize this part? A lot of times you're going to come across things in music theory that don't have a simple answer. Like, why is a perfect fourth called a perfect fourth? Because music theory spans about 3,000 years of history, and all along the way, people have added to the study of music with their own contributions. We've kept some things the same, changed some things, and gotten rid of other things entirely. So, without having to go into the history of how the intervals got their names, these are the names that intervals have today. Let's do a quick example. If you get a question where you're asked to identify the interval between two notes, I always start with the lower note and treat it as the tonic, or the first note of the scale. Here, the lower note is C, so let's bring in the C major scale. Now, the second note is an F. So let's see where F is above the C in the C major scale. Here it is, and it's a perfect fourth. So, this interval is a perfect fourth. Let's do another example, but we're gonna use the same notes. This time, F will be the lower note, and C will be the higher note. Remember that we always start with the lower note and treat it as the tonic, or the first note of the scale. This time, F is the lower note, so let's bring in the F major scale. And we have C as the higher note, so let's look where C is above the F in the F major scale. And here it is, a perfect fifth. So, this interval is a perfect fifth. I wanted to use the same notes in both of the examples to show you the importance of the position of the notes. Just because F and C are a fourth in C major doesn't mean they will always be a fourth. Make sure you pay attention to the positioning of the notes as well. I think this is a good place to stop to give you some time to practice identifying intervals in major scales. Next time, we'll talk about minor, augmented, and diminished intervals as well. And if you're a patron, there are practice worksheets you can download over on the Patreon page. If you'd like to become a patron of Quartet and get access to these worksheets, check out the Patreon link here. Thanks for watching.